How do we know God is real? A simple question with major implications. Well, I'm Jonathan Owens, and this is another episode of The Word Spoken. We're going to hop right into this video talking about 3 reasons why we can show how God's existence is not only plausible, but it makes the most sense in explaining a world with so vast complexity and intricate details in all aspects of life. Let's dive right into it. First is the cosmos. Second, creation. And third, consciousness. Let's start with the cosmos. What about the cosmos, the universe, that we can show that God is real? Well, this concept of the laws of nature gets me, because the laws of nature would have had to be in place before the universe began. Well, how can laws be applicable to a universe that doesn't exist? Let's look at Alan Guth's answer to this.
Right. And so you have this enormity from virtually nothing, but it's not quite nothing.
Well, this is certainly not a question that physics has a definite answer to, as you might guess. I think the only context in which physicists can say anything here that I think is relevant is if we are just willing to assume that the laws of physics existed before there was any kind of a universe. If you ask us where did the laws of physics come from, right now I think physics doesn't really have any clue about where the laws of physics came from. I would not want to go so far as to say that it's a question beyond the range of science. I think someday we may have a clue. But if you ask where we are now, I think the honest answer is we don't have a clue. But if we assume...
Did you catch what Alan said? He said that the presupposing that the laws already are in place and already exist. But what are these laws? How can laws be into existence before a universe began? Where did the laws come from? Who wrote the laws? And by what standard do the laws operate? Let's look at Dr. Stephen Meyer's answer to this.
How does math, pure math, generate matter? And this was first acknowledged by Alexander Vilenkin. He said it in the very last page of his book, Many Worlds in One. He says, before there was matter, space, time, and energy, what could these fundamental laws of physics, what tablet could they have been written on? In our experience, math is conceptual. It comes from a mind. And he then said, are we then really saying that there was a mind that predates the universe? Problem one, in philosophy of physics, this is called the reification of math, treating math as if it has the causal powers to produce actual matter, space, time, and energy. In our experience, math doesn't have that power. It's something we use to describe matter, space, time, and energy. It doesn't produce any of those entities.
Now look at this point. This is fascinating, because now you're telling me that if the laws are mathematical equations exist in minds. They exist from a mind. So are you telling me a mind predated the universe? You can't escape the inescapable of the laws of nature having to already be in place, because if they weren't, a universe wouldn't know how to behave, what to react to, if the laws didn't dictate what it should and how it should operate and operate by. Think about it. So where do these laws come from? We see and know as Christians that the laws come from the lawgiver, who established all things, created all things, and made everything in an intricate way so that life can continue to go on after God originally created it. Think about it. If there was no order, would we have showed up? If there was no order, could the earth still rotate around the sun the way it should? If there was no order, could the sun stand and continue to burn without consuming the planet surrounding it? If there was no order, then why can't we count on each day and the sun rising and setting each day, and we can actually predict things in the future knowing that the laws of nature are so constant that we can actually bank on tomorrow being a certain thing based on the laws of nature. This is fascinating. I hope you think so too. Well then, what's the second reason? Creation. The understanding of evolution and the understanding of the first life. Let's look at this other video of both Dr. Tour and Dr. Meyer.
Why am I, a layman, coming to this a century and a half after Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species, scratching my head and saying, fellows, this first question, where does life come from in the first place, that's a pretty big one. How is it that a sort of interested layman can only suddenly realize, you guys had this elaborate, what about this? Did science simply treat it as unimportant or so easy that they'd get to it sooner or later? The question of the origin of life.
Nobody knows the origin of life. Nobody has ever known the origin of life, but people assume, very much like the Babylonians assumed, that it came out of a stinking pond. That's where they say their life came out of, and their gods came out of that same pond. And that's the primordial soup model, and that model persists today. You look in any textbook, from elementary school to advanced college textbooks, and it will speak of the primordial soup model. Life came out of that there were molecules that came together, and they formed higher order structures, and that formed a cell, and that led to life. That is a bunch of nonsense.
Okay. This is fascinating. This is fascinating for a couple reasons. Because if you understand that scientists in all this time still have yet to be able to crack the explanation of how the first life got started and where did the information come from. Because you can't do anything without information on the cell. You can't do anything without the first life even being there. There's nothing to evolve if there's no life to begin with. So where did it come from? You can't say God did it and then leave God alone. Because if God created and started it off, you now have to subsequently listen to that God and the way he did it. But if you don't believe God exists at all, then how did the information get on the cell? And how did the first life even begin? Thirdly, consciousness. This has to be one of the most scrutinized topics and the most mind-boggling topics in the entire world. Scientists have still yet to explain how are material beings conscious to begin with. How did consciousness arise? They say consciousness emerged, but they can't understand. And this is not explaining what we don't know. This is explaining what we do know. What we do know about consciousness, what we do know about life. The best explanation is that God exists. Let's look at this amazing clip of Dr. Sam Parnia talking about consciousness.
Now, if you look at the study of cardiac arrest, people who've technically gone beyond the threshold of death, there are now a number of cases that have come through, and we've also found them in our studies, where particularly we can pinpoint that consciousness appears to be ongoing when the brain has shut down, and people are able to verify specific details what was happening during that period, which tells us that awareness, consciousness has not shut down, even though the brain has shut down. Do we need more research? Absolutely, we need more research, because it's a very, very difficult area to study. If this is proven through science, that consciousness can exist independent of brain function, what it simply tells us is that the brain is vital, but it is not the producer of consciousness. The brain acts more like the TV set. If we were to take a TV and put it here right now and switch it on, we'd see all kinds of sounds and pictures. But it doesn't mean they're being produced by the TV set. They're coming from somewhere else. And of course, if you were to show a TV set to a 2-year-old or to a dog, they would think the presenter is sitting in the TV. You see little puppies go, and if they see a dog, they start playing with it, they think it's there. And if you were to be limited, as we are today, we don't know how the whole thing works with consciousness. You could obviously say that I believe people are in the TV set, and you could test your hypothesis by going to the back of the TV, putting a couple of wires out, and you say, look, I just lost the sound. I just lost half the picture. I got fuzziness on it. Therefore, this is all produced from the TV. And that's what we're doing with the brain. Of course, if you get brain lesions, if you get damage, a stroke, or any kind of disease, you lose aspects of consciousness. But that doesn't mean the consciousness was produced from the brain. It could be, but it also may be that it isn't. And essentially, that's what we would be able to do.
This is fascinating. Many people have heard near-death experiences and these different life-changing events. But since this is true, that the human soul can be separate from the body, that tells you right there that consciousness is not deduced by the brain. We have a doctor saying that these are real cases, and there have been numerous cases reported in the Lancet, other medical journals, by other doctors. This is not a new phenomenon. So where is this coming from? How can the consciousness be separate from the brain, and yet we say that the consciousness depends on the brain to be something? It's fascinating, because this lets us know that there's something greater than the material. And if there is something greater than material, then only the immaterial could have created it. You can't get something immaterial from something material. If there is a soul separate from the brain, which is the consciousness and the life force of a human, then something that is supernatural, super material, had to create it, because you cannot get immaterial from material. There are several reasons why you can say God exists, but these 3 reasons are the backbone of why, how can this exist without God? How can this exist without the supernatural? How could this exist without God invoking His plan, His power into it? Think about these things. But the next time you do, think about how could this be true without God? At some point you have to think it takes more faith not to believe than to believe.